Most people are taught to believe that interest rates are boring, that they are technical, that they are simply a background variable adjusted by economists who know more than everyone else. But interest rates are not neutral, and they are not boring. They are the central lever of the modern economic system. They decide who accumulates assets and who becomes trapped inside permanent obligation. They decide who benefits from time and who is destroyed by it. What I am about to explain is what I call the Mandrake Mechanism. It is the repeating cycle that governs boom and bust. It is the reason housing affordability rises and collapses even when nothing about the house itself changes. It is the mechanism that allows the system to extract value from ordinary people while convincing them that any failure was their own fault. To understand the Mandrake Mechanism, you must stop thinking about prices. Prices are a distraction. You must think about payments. People do not buy houses. They buy monthly obligations. They buy a number that must be paid every single month without fail. That number determines whether they are free or trapped. A house does not become affordable because the price is low. It becomes affordable because the payment fits inside a narrow band of tolerance. That band is dictated almost entirely by interest rates. When interest rates are low, the payment shrinks. When interest rates rise, the payment explodes. The house itself does not change. The walls do not improve. The land does not become larger. The square footage does not increase. Yet the economic reality flips completely. This is where the Mandrake Mechanism begins. When interest rates are pushed down, borrowing becomes cheap. Cheap borrowing allows buyers to stretch beyond what they otherwise could. They bid more for the same asset. Banks approve more loans. Credit expands. Asset prices rise. The media celebrates rising home values. Politicians claim success. Homeowners feel richer, even though nothing real has been produced. No new productivity was created. No additional value was generated. Only credit expansion disguised as prosperity. Now timing enters the picture, and timing is everything. In the period before the pandemic, interest rates were driven to extreme lows. The system was desperate to stimulate borrowing and spending. People who understood what was happening locked in long-term, fixed debt at absurdly favorable terms. I know someone who did exactly that. He bought a 3-bedroom, 1,800 square foot house in Gainesville. He locked in a mortgage rate of 2.7%. His monthly payment sits around $2,000. He has full control of the house and long-term stability. That mortgage is not a liability. It is an asset. At a 2.7% rate, the interest he pays is lower than the rate at which housing prices, rents, and replacement costs have been rising. In real terms, the bank is losing. Inflation is eating the debt. Every year that passes, the real value of what he owes shrinks. His payment stays fixed while the world around him becomes more expensive. Inflation works for him instead of against him. He did not simply buy shelter. He captured a mispricing in the system. He locked in cheap money during a moment of monetary desperation. If he holds that mortgage long enough, inflation will effectively erase it. The house will be worth more while the debt dissolves. That is how you win inside this system. Now compare that outcome to someone who bought later. When interest rates were raised aggressively, housing prices were still elevated from the previous boom, but borrowing costs exploded. A buyer entering at that moment is crushed from both sides. The purchase price reflects inflated credit, while the interest rate reflects tightening. The monthly payment becomes suffocating. The exact same house now costs dramatically more per month, even if the sticker price barely changes. This is the destructive phase of the Mandrake Mechanism. A buyer who enters here is not buying a home. They are buying fragility. Their payment consumes a massive share of income. Their margin for error disappears. If prices fall, they are trapped. If rates fall later, refinancing resets the balance. If they need to move, they risk locking in losses. Every option closes. This is where people get ruined. And here is the part that is never explained honestly. The system profits from both phases. During the low-rate boom, banks originate enormous volumes of loans. Fees are collected, interest spreads are captured, mortgages are bundled, sold, and leveraged. During the high-rate bust, ordinary buyers are frozen out, but institutions with capital step in. Cash buyers, funds, entities that can wait. The same house that destroyed a household becomes a yield-producing asset for someone else. This is not an accident, it is the design. Interest rates rise because inflation rises. Inflation rises because cheap credit inflated demand. The cure punishes a different group than the disease rewarded. Raising rates does not hurt those who already own assets and liquidity. It hurts those who rely on wages and credit. That asymmetry is the point. This is why making the wrong move at the wrong time can destroy decades of effort. Buy at the peak, and you are locked in. Miss the refinance window, and you are permanently behind. Sell during a downturn, and you crystallize losses. There is almost no forgiveness for error when you live entirely inside a leveraged system. That fragility is profitable. A population exposed to constant timing risk is easy to manage. People afraid of resetting loans or losing access to credit do not challenge systems. They comply. They accept worse terms. They internalize blame. Boom and bust cycles are not failures of the system. They are the output. The Mandrake Mechanism works because people are taught to watch prices while the system operates on payments. They think in terms of ownership while being governed by cash flow. They believe effort determines outcome while timing quietly selects winners. This is why two people with similar incomes end up in radically different realities. One captured cheap debt at the right moment. The other entered at the wrong phase and became trapped. And when it goes wrong, the system encourages self-blame. People are told they were irresponsible. They are told they should have known better. But responsibility is meaningless when the rules are hidden and the critical variable is never explained. If you understand the Mandrake Mechanism, your behavior changes. You stop chasing peaks. You stop panicking at bottoms. You stop treating housing as lifestyle and start treating debt as strategy. You realize affordability is the weapon, not price, and that long-term fixed debt during periods of monetary desperation is one of the few ways an individual can reverse the extraction. That 2.7% mortgage was not luck. It was positioning. It was understanding the machine and acting when the system was mispriced. The Mandrake Mechanism thrives on confusion. Confusion keeps people passive. Passive people are profitable. Once you see it, you stop asking why everything feels harder. You start asking who benefits from the difficulty. That question changes everything. The most dangerous lie people believe is that making a safe decision is the same as making a smart decision. The system trains people to avoid risk at exactly the wrong moments and to embrace risk when it is already too late. That inversion is not accidental. It is engineered. When interest rates are low, people are afraid. They hear that prices are high. They hear that something feels off. They hear that it might be a bubble. So they wait. They hold cash. They delay. They tell themselves they are being prudent. Meanwhile, the system is practically begging people to lock in long-term fixed debt at cheap rates. When interest rates rise, fear flips. Now people feel urgency. They are told rates might go even higher. They are told to act before they are priced out forever. So they rush in exactly when the terms are worst. They accept brutal payments. They stretch themselves thin. They take maximum risk disguised as responsibility. This is the timing trap. The system does not need to predict individual behavior. It only needs to create an environment where most people respond the same way at the same time. That alone guarantees that the majority will always enter late and exit wrong. Think about what people are actually optimizing for. They are not optimizing for long-term purchasing power. They are optimizing for emotional comfort. They want to feel safe. They want certainty. They want validation. They want confirmation that they are not making a mistake. The problem is that certainty always arrives after opportunity has passed. By the time something feels safe, it is already priced for safety. By the time something feels dangerous, that danger is often exactly what creates asymmetric opportunity. This is why the Mandrake Mechanism is so effective. It aligns monetary policy with human psychology in a way that systematically punishes the average participant. Now let's talk about liquidity, because this is where the trap tightens. People are taught that having money locked away is discipline, that delaying access to their own capital is virtuous, that illiquidity is a feature. Retirement accounts, long-term mortgages, restricted assets, penalties for early access, all of this is framed as protection against bad behavior. In reality, illiquidity is one of the most powerful control mechanisms in the system. When your money is locked up, you lose optionality. You cannot respond to opportunity. You cannot defend yourself against shocks. You cannot reposition when conditions change. You are forced to continue operating on the same narrow path, regardless of what the environment does. This is why two people with the same income can experience completely different lives. One has liquidity and flexibility. The other has assets on paper but no usable leverage in real life. Liquidity is not about cash sitting idle. Liquidity is about freedom of movement. The system quietly punishes liquidity. Banks question withdrawals. Institutions flag transfers. Accounts are frozen for compliance. People are taught that wanting access to their own money is suspicious, that desiring autonomy is a red flag. Meanwhile, the largest players operate almost entirely on liquidity. They move capital instantly, they rebalance, they wait, they strike when conditions favor them. They do not fear volatility because volatility is how assets change hands. This brings us to the exit trap. Most people never plan exits. They plan entries. They obsess over buying at the right time but never think about how they will unwind a position if conditions shift. The system exploits this blindness. Once you are locked into a high payment obligation, your exit options disappear. Selling becomes emotionally and financially painful. Refinancing may no longer be possible. Walking away carries stigma and damage, so people endure. They accept worse conditions year after year because leaving feels worse than staying. This is how long-term extraction works, not through force, but through narrowing options. The Mandrake Mechanism does not need to confiscate wealth. It only needs to structure decisions so that most people voluntarily accept outcomes that benefit the system. The real winners are not smarter, they are better positioned. They move when liquidity is abundant and fear is high. They lock in favorable terms when the system is desperate. They avoid irreversible commitments when conditions are hostile. This is why timing matters more than effort in a credit-based economy. Effort can increase income. Timing determines whether that income compounds or evaporates. The final layer of the trap is narrative. The system tells stories that justify outcomes after the fact. If you win, it was skill. If you lose, it was irresponsibility. Structural forces are never mentioned. Incentives are never explained. Cycles are framed as unpredictable, but the pattern repeats over and over. Cheap credit, asset inflation, tightening, distress, transfer, reset. Once you see the pattern, you stop participating blindly. You stop reacting emotionally. You stop accepting advice from people whose incentives are misaligned with yours. The Mandrake Mechanism is not mystical. It is mechanical. It only works on people who do not understand how it operates. And the moment you understand it, the system loses its most powerful weapon against you: confusion.